I'm very proud to be a descendant. My father, William Robertson, was a medic in the 87 in World War II. And I curse him almost every day now because I'm the chair of the 10th Mountain Division Foundation. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not easy work. I know it is. In the trenches with the 10th, but I love it. I love the results that we're getting in the tenure that I've been able to work with some fabulous people. And so I represent the 10th Mountain Division Foundation tonight, and I want to share a couple of wonderful pieces of news and invite you to participate in some of these events. But before I do that, I would like to ask all of our veterans to stand, please. All veterans, all forces. Thank you for your service. Any 10th Mountain Division veterans? If I can, I met one at the store the other day. And actually 3 years before, or 3 years ago, he almost ran me over on his bike and on the path because he spun around, he saw my 10th hat. And so anyway, I know also any of other descendants, I think we've got at least one or two, please stand up. 10th Mountain Division descendants. Steamboat Springs is the home of a number of 10th Mountain veterans, some who were born and raised here, and many who came back to be here and to influence Ski Town, USA. And so when we talk about Ski Town, USA, and we talk about the 10th Mountain Division, and the Foundation's motto being linking the legacy, there is no better place to do that. And tonight, one of the pieces of news I want to share, if you have not already seen it, is that we've got Gordy Wren, Crosby Perry Smith's flags flying. They are two Olympians that were veterans of the 10th Mountain Division. And the 10th Mountain Division, our modern division, home in upstate New York at Fort Drum, is patched with the U.S. ski and snowboard team. So when you root for your favorite steamboat ski and snowboard and other Olympians this winter, they're carrying on the legacy. And you look for the patch and cheer them on. So that's a very exciting news. The division has worked very hard to get the Army as a sponsor and to have specifically the 10th Mountain Division patched to the ski team. February 18th will be the 81st anniversary of the ascent of Riva Ridge. I think Lance might share a little bit about that. I want to thank Steamboat Resort. They are teaming up with the foundation, and we are going to be one of over 20 now 90-pound rucksack challenges. And it's a ski-mo event. So if you are so inclined and you want to climb uphill and put 90 pounds on your back, you too can earn the rucksack award. But as I look out, many of you might be down below cheering on those who are climbing up the mountain, and we will be singing 90-pound rucksack and drinking 10th Mountain whiskey cordial. But anyway, please look, I've got some press releases in the back. It's a link to where you can register if you want to do the race. It is the brainchild of Christian Beckwith, who comes out of Jackson Hole, another wonderful historian and storyteller. And he has worked on this for several years, and we have over 20 resorts now participating. So it will start at 5:30 on the 18th, which is the specific time that the 10th Mountain Division started their ascent up Riva Ridge in the Apennines Mountains of Italy. So anyway, thank you all for being here. I want to thank Katie and Candace for allowing me this time and this opportunity to share with you. And I'm here for questions afterwards if you'd like. But at this time, I'm very honored to introduce Lance Blyth.
Thank you for coming. Wow, I better not suck. I'd like to say thanks to Pioneers for the invite. Nancy Kramer, thank you for this and for all 10th Mountain Foundation does. Pioneers Museum, thanks to Storm King. Awesome to have the beer. That's definitely one of the reasons I come over this side of the Continental Divide. So Nancy said to introduce myself. Okay, real quick. This is me. I was raised cowboy between Taos, New Mexico and Sheridan, Wyoming, mainly. We're on the horse and cow side of things. My father was a heck of a horseman. Never not had horses, as Corporal Lund put it. Did that for a while. Made enough money to go to college, but I looked around at it and went to University of Wyoming. Paid $438 a semester back in the 1980s. Determined that cowboying, was kind of dirty, and you had early mornings and late nights, and you slept in the dirt a lot, and you could get seriously hurt, so I joined the Marine Corps. I did not think that through. So just Baxter Blackwood coming out, that is cowboy logic. I was an infantry officer through the 1990s. Desert Storm, first Gulf War, LA riots, main things I did. Marine Corps decided they were done with me. I'm sure there's some fellow jarheads in here. You know about that. Marine Corps is a lot of loyalty to the Marine Corps, not a lot of loyalty down to Marines. But that's just how it is. You accept that when you ride for the brand. So I went back to school. So I was trained Marine. Third thing I said, well, what the hell am I going to do? What do I want to do? I said, I want to get some sleep, number one. After 4 years in the fleet being an infantry officer, it was, and so I ended up going back to Colorado State for a master's, ended up in Northern Arizona, do my PhD, trained of all things as a colonial Latin Americanist working on northern Mexico. Published a book called Chiricahua and Janos, still out there somewhere back in 2012, relatively well received at the time. But I got back to Colorado in 2007. We got back to Colorado Springs because I didn't really want to didn't want to leave the Rockies, didn't want to leave the West. That's where I'm from, that's what I am. So I ended up working with the federal government as a historian, and I ended up working for North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, and U.S. Northern Command as a command historian. That's my day job, and I get to adjunct a bit at the Air Force Academy, which is totally awesome because cadets are exhausted most of the time, but they're good kids. And so, but once we're back in Colorado, of course, as you all well know, winter is the longest season, right? Here in the mountains, we got snow well into June, July. So my wife Gretchen and I are like, well, what are we going to do? It's like, well, there's a thing called backcountry skiing and stuff. We can like, well, how do you do that? Well, you just put skis on your feet and go uphill. I'm like, I'm not so sure, but she liked it. Bit of an uphill specialist, like, okay, I'll get into that. So as part of that process, back in, I want to say, January 2019, we were up on a ski tour of Chicago Ridge. Oh my God, what a miserable freaking day. And to get my mind off of it, I'm sure you've all been here, start thinking about what else can I think about, right? What else can I go down with? The clouds cleared, I could see hail. I'm like, what did they do? How did they ski? I was learning to tally at the time. Not that no one really learns to tally, you just are always trying to tally. And so I started looking around, and I couldn't find it. Many good books out there. Morty Seiserman, McKay Jenkins, Flint Whitlock, you had here in November, kind of kicked all this off in the 1990s. Great stuff. They weren't written by people who were asking these questions. And I realized, well, hell, I need another project just for S&Gs, so this will be it. So I ended up writing this book, pulling it down, really more of a military and skiing and mountaineering history of the division. And I bring it up to present day. That's the things that I've done differently with this. So with that, what I want to talk to you about this evening is just a few things I learned about it. Because one of the things I discovered here in Colorado, that a lot of people know about the division. And in fact, I will pass on the thanks of Major General Nauman and Command Sergeant Major Johnson, the command team of 10th Mountain Division right now, who I know, they came out last year to Vail and were blown away by the reception, and they would be blown away by this as well, because I explained to them is that we view that as part of us. We know that that is our past. We understand that is our heritage, to an extent that the division is beginning to grasp, and there's some value in that we'll talk about. Okay, so what are some things I learned that I could tell you that you may not know? Well, the first thing I kind of found out was this. We all know the story, right? Minnie Dole convinces the Army to start the ski troops. Yeah, not really true. Minnie couldn't have known this, by the way. A lot of stuff was classified. The Army knew of mountain warfare well before the war began. The man on your looker's left there, General Marshall, signed out a manual in 1939, had a pretty good section on mountain warfare. And it said that you can fight in the mountains if you are properly trained, equipped, and prepared. So they understood this. They had looked at stuff from World War I, they had translated documents that they knew how to do this. What the U.S. Army did between the wars, it thought. It didn't have people, it didn't have money, didn't have equipment, but it could educate and think and train. So they worked with this. So while they knew they needed it, they didn't know what they needed. They didn't understand the specifics of it. So in the summer of 1940, those of you, this will be on the quiz afterwards, France falls, right? France goes away in June 1940. That is the most major geopolitical event in the 20th century. Don't let anyone else tell you anything otherwise. Completely flip the table. It is the beginning of where we are today, the angst you see going on right now. Marshall wants to start mobilizing a whole bunch of divisions, and he gets the authority to do it. He realizes those in the north may need some extra training, so he decides in August we're going to do some ski training. But no one knew how to do that. The Army is a southern organization. There isn't anyone who knows how to ski as far as I can tell with that. So when Minnie Dole does show up, exploits his Yale connections to get a meeting with General Marshall, they're like, yes, we can use your people, the ski patrol system, to begin to do this, to begin this training. The second part of it was, it's just not the skiers. Because the mountaineers, of which there's even fewer at this time, is the American Alpine Club. They look around, a guy by the name of Bob Bates and a friend of his named Ad Carter are climbing in Switzerland in July of 1939 as the Swiss are mobilizing. They see Swiss mountain troops go out, and they say, I wonder if we could does the U.S. know how to do this? Could we do this? They keep asking this question. By the fall of 1940, they convinced the American Alpine Club to offer their assistance to the U.S., to the War Department, for helping train mountain troops. Their path was a bit easier, because the man on the right is Henry Stimson, who is the Secretary of War. Good friend of T. Art, a Rough Rider in his later days, and a man who used to come out west here and climb mountains. So he was a member of the American Alpine Club. They had his address, and they sent him a message. And the Army shows up to a meeting of the American Alpine Club, and they have Bob Bates lay out all the equipment they used on K2, the first American attempt on that. And it is all the socks. And, okay, wait a minute, how many of you have a closet full of ski gear? He lays all that out. How many of you have friends who show up and you're like, you need all this stuff? And like, yes. What's the temperature? Where are we going? What are we doing? They lay it all out, and he impresses on this two things. One, how much time it takes to learn to use this. That none of it is made in the United States at this time. This is all stuff they had to go buy in Europe on the way to Nepal. The third thing that they lay out is you got to go in the mountains and do this. It's at that point, December 1940, the United States Army realizes we ain't just going to do ski troops, folks. We need to be able to do mountain troops, and we need a mountain camp to do that. So that's the second unknown tale, is we do get a mountain camp, right? Here in Colorado, Camp Hale. Here's a bar bet you can go out and win now. A unit called the 10th Mountain Division was never at Camp Hale. Okay, good. Because here's what's going on, is the Army is mobilizing. it has a plan at one point to have over 200 divisions. Divisions is a basic way you organize about 15,000, at this time, all dudes. The Army thinks we're going to need about 200 of those, maybe 8 of those will need to be mounted. Well, the Army did 89 divisions in World War II. It's called the 90 Division Gamble. They didn't get to 90. 89 Army, 6 Marine divisions. You will always run out of infantry. Always. So there's some experimentation going on here. They decide to start in the fall of 1941 with just 1 battalion, 750. That's where a lot of the early folks come in. They then expand that out to be a regiment in 42, and then they're like, okay, we need to move into the mountains and train. And then throughout 1942, they finally settle on the Pando Valley at Camp Hale. They settle on it because it is high enough altitude, it has lots of snow during the year. That was number one. They didn't understand a lot about altitude and inversions yet or anything. It has a railroad through it. It has a hardball road through it. Just put up there, that piece of Highway 24, Lincoln, Minturn, Leadville, is probably the most expensive piece of highway in the United States at that time. And then, but we need to have someone in charge. It's the Army, right? Someone's got to be in charge. What are we going to do? Well, the first thing they set up is this thing called the Mountain Training Center. That's what moves up there November of 1942. It has 1 regiment, the 87th, about 3,000 dudes, brings them in. It decides to raise a 2nd regiment, the 86th Mountain Infantry. The cowboy who trained me in the Powder River Country, Wyoming, Walter Bills Jr., had enlisted in the Army in 1940. He was too short to go in the Marine Corps. He tried. At that time, they were pre-war, so he was a regular Army, but a ranch kid, and so like, hey, we need more mule people, so he's at Hale from 42 into 1943. And with the 86, lots of college grads, lots of college boys. So you have all these Wyoming and Western mule packers and cowboys with all these. I suspect I know who won the poker games. They form that up. They're there. 43, the Army's still trying to figure it out, but they run one more experiment, and that's called the 10th Light Division. They set that up in 43, and the idea is we can get 12,000 men's worth of combat power for 10,000 men. Anyone ever worked in corporate America with consultants? Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it didn't work, but that's the experiment from 43 to 44. All these dudes are put aside to run this experiment, see if this light division is going to work. It doesn't. They say, hey, let's just make it a regular Army division. Remember George Marshall, previous slide? He goes, no. So I made a deal with these men. That if they came and brought their expertise and experience, I would make use of it. Make them a mountain division. They make them a mountain division. Sadly, don't say this outside this room, they had to do that in Texas. Camp Swift, Texas, outside Austin, November 6, 1944. November 6, 10th Mountain Division Day here in Colorado. They redesignate them 10th Mountain, but they spent the previous 2 months reorganizing. The main thing they did is they added more guys, they added more mules. And a lot of mules came in there. I just recently we were talking with Nike a week or so ago. Bill Bowerman, who starts Nike, right? He's the track coach who begins that. He was the regimental supply officer for the 86th Mountain Infantry because he'd worked with mules before. They said, hey, you've got 4,000 mules showing up. You need to go break them in. So he had to go do that in Texas on the way. So you can go in this bar bet. There was a unit, it became 10th Mountain Division. It wasn't yet while it was here in Colorado, and that's a history. Oh, here's the other one. I hear this all the time, like, oh yeah, they have all these expert skiers and all the climbers, and like, no, they did not. First off, talk about the National Ski Patrol and the skiing. I love this picture for 2 reasons. Number one, there is absolutely no place in New England that looks like that. Little that I can tell. Number two, I just love the skier taking a biff there. He's gone. He's gone. No yard sale, those skis didn't come off. So maybe there's a knee gone there. The thing was this, is they realized very quickly that it was not resort skiing they needed. They needed people who could spend days out in the backcountry moving across the snow and living out of their packs. We call that today backcountry skiing, right? That's the type of skiing they did. There were probably only a couple hundred people in the United States who did that, and most of them were the dudes out of California. The ski climbers, the ski mountaineer section, they call it ski mountaineering, of the Sierra Club. Got by the name of a couple people out of that. So they weren't there. So you probably have a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand skiers. Climbers, mountaineers, climbing was not a thing, except a little bit in California. The mountaineers, the American Alpine Club, these were all wealthy people from back east, from the big cities, who could do this, had the time, and could go to Europe and learn how to do it. There was probably less than 20 of those who were of the proper age, because they were college educated. Many of them were pulled off to do other things. They went in the Navy, they went for the Army Air Forces. They end up, I mentioned Bob Bates, he ends up in the officer of the Quartermaster General, designing all the gear. So they had other things they need them to do. So they were not, but what they quickly found out is they would go out here, and here you have the National Ski Patrol puts out this, I think this is from beginning of 1942, and they're going to say it, and they're saying skiing and rock climbability is not demanded. They simply wanted people who wanted to be in the mountains. We're here in Steamboat, right? There are people who came back to the mountains after that. My neighborhood, where I live in Colorado Springs, there are at least 2 veterans who came back to the mountains to live there. It was the desire to be in the mountains was the thing. That's what drove them, that's what brought them back. And that's what did so much of what we did. So other unknown tale I got here, I kind of stumbled across was, there was actually not a lot of skiing or climbing being done at Hale by this division. We kind of think that they're always climbing, they're out skiing all that time. Not always, because they had to train this entire division. And the United States Army had a system that was on a frickin' assembly line to train divisions. We sent divisions overseas in World War I unprepared. So the guys who experienced that went never again. You mobilize them, you do about 16 weeks of training, a little more after that, and then you deploy. To this day, the U.S. military is a training-focused organization. Do it day in, day out. It's not something you just pick up on the side on the way to go. So, looking at that, I realized that they did about 4 weeks of ski training each season. That's about all they did. They start down at Hale, kind of around there, then they move up to Cooper. The skiing, 1/3 of it was on cross-country techniques, moving through the mountains. You see all the skiing, all the downhill, that was the bottom of their importance. That's what looked at the newsreels, that's why it's there. But it was the ability to move cross-country with a pack. They never went more about 45 pounds. The 90 pounds was if you put everything in there. They learned to pull it down, just like who is not a weight weenie after about their second season of backcountry skiing, right? Like, well, I can save 12 grams. This is awesome. It costs $200 more, but I can save 12 grams. So they spent about that amount of time. Climbing, again, they spent 1 week in the fall of 1944. They went back in the summer of in the fall of 43, went back in the summer of 44 and climbed. I'm sure a number of you have been on the road from Leadville going north. You go past Hale, you cut down, you do that big switch down into the bottom of the valley. If you look over there, there's a crag. That's where they trained. That's where the climbing training was done. There's a little bit down on the rocks at Hale. This is where they trained. So they trained about, probably about 9,000 guys went through this. This that you see there. And you can see that there's the road turnoff. That bridge is still there. That is a dispersed camping area. I think the Forest Service, Force Road 703, back into there. So it was very focused training. It was part of this larger system they were doing. So this was a military unit doing military training. Now, the training that we always remember, it's the D series, right? Right, you've heard of that division series. That's the culminating exercise for the division. That 13 to 16 week 16 week training period to move a division. This is the main thing. What the Army liked to do is like take a division, move it to an entirely different base, and put like 2 divisions against each other to do what we call force on force today. Problem. There's only one mountain camp, there's only one mountain trained division. If you put a standard division up there in February of 1944, you would have a lot of casualties. So they have to do it completely in-house. The thing of this is it was meant to test the division, not the men. And it turned into a sufferfest, because no one explained to them, you were just training aids to make sure that the division staff and the regimental staffs, the colonels and the generals can do this right. Because you don't want to find that out in combat, right? If they're going to screw up here. So they did it, and there were 3 one-week sessions. Every time that weekend, they come in, we're testing the entire division, they would pull them back to a rest area to basically train, could you get their laundry done? Could you get their mail delivered? Could you get hot meals to them? Test these logistics things. These simple things of moving stuff around, or so, they're difficult to do in best times. They are dang near impossible in the mountains, because of the amount of time it takes to do anything. So every weekend, they would pull them back into a rest area. The first weekend, they pulled them back to Camp Hale, had them camp on the parade ground within sight of their barracks. That was not the best thing to do. And so they end up, basically, morale goes in the tank in early 44. And it goes in the tank in early 44 because of this. They're miserable, they've suffered. No one has really explained to them what's going on. And this is sometimes, some of you this will make sense, some of you this will not. But they didn't have a mission. They didn't know if they were going into the war, where they were going to go. A number of you, I'm sure, have trained for a variety of events. Can you imagine training, doing your training routine every day, and never having actually a race on the calendar? So that's the situation they were in. This is understood. They had a good spring of snow. Keep our fingers crossed this year, folks. So they went out and did some spring skiing, went up on Cooper and skied some more in May. Gorgeous. As the melt came in June, they went back and did some rock climbing. So what do you do with backcountry people? Let them go ski, let them go climb, let them go be in the mountains. They do that, and then they send them to Texas. And morale goes in the toilet once again because no one explained to them what was going on. So, but they do get up in Texas. They do reorganize and re-equip as a mountain division. And they end up being sent to Italy starting in December of 1944 into the beginning of 1945. The Italian campaign, kind of working on some of that stuff there. Here we had the problem of no one really looked at that and went, oh, look, Italy, mountains. They went, oh, look, Italy, coasts. And there was repeatedly, bottom line was because no one realized there were a lot of mountains in Italy, a lot of probably needless casualties when it came down to it. There were 2 main German defensive lines, the Gustav line south of Rome, and the Gothic line, what would be done in the North Apennines. Down south, it's the French that break that. They have Moroccans, mountain troops. And they basically walk up onto, and spend 4 days walking across a massive, drop down the other side, and the Germans go, where did all those guys come from? And so at that point, the Allies go, oh, mountain troops can be really worthwhile. Guys who know how to work, moving this stuff, moving this terrain can really be useful. So when offered the 10th Mountain Division to Italy, it was rapidly accepted. It was offered to Europe. Europe said, no, we don't want all the mules. That was understandable. In Italy, they said, yes, we want all the mules. By the way, the mules got sent out of New Orleans, 250 at a time. Only 500 ever made it to Italy before the war is over. You can pack men in like sardines, you cannot do that. It's abuse. But we'll talk about that. So, we get into the initial, the division goes into the line, as we say, in end of January 1945. It will stay there to the end of the war. It's one of the few divisions, because of the time that it was there, that never got pulled out. And because of that, it took casualties about 1,000. It did not get wiped out and reorganized like a lot of divisions did over time. And that's why one of the identities remains so strong, is that most of the people who were there survived. Not all, but most. And they knew they had done something unique. So they have to go up, and they're told, hey, we have a problem. Highway 64, that's kind of the road running up through there, off to the right side of the map. That's the main route. Problem is, Mount Belvedere there, the Germans have that, they can overlook it. They can call for fire as you try to move up it. So we need to clear out Mount Belvedere. Once they have the 10th Mountain Division in the line, they say, go figure it out. Division Commander John Hayes shows up a day or two before they head for Italy. Medal of Honor winner from World War I, an artilleryman. Didn't know anything about this, but he knew his staff did. All the people doing the planning, all of it, they had spent years doing this in many cases. And oh, by the way, if you go to Camp Hale, you stand at the main gate and you look to the south, it looks a hell of a lot like this terrain looking north. Got a ridge on one side, I go, yeah, okay, I know where I'm at. I got it. There's orientation in terrain is a critical factor here. Say, okay, we need to seize Mount Belvedere. But to do that, we have to worry about these German positions on the backside of this one place. Now, they call it the Marcinella Campanello Ridge. It becomes the Riva Ridge as the tellings are done. But taking that was to free up the entire division to go in the attack. You got 9 battalions in division. This day's about 1,000 guys each at that time. And so they tell the 86th, first the 86th, get up there. There had been attacks on this ridge before. They could not stay up there. I think anyone who has hiked or biked up Steamboat in the summer, that's the kind of approach we're mainly talking about. They would put 5 routes in, 2 of them would need ropes. On one route, I state, Christian Beckwith will disagree with me, they put more ropes than they probably needed. You don't let a mountaineer pick the route up. You want someone who's like, that's too tough, go over here. They needed ropes on 2 of the routes to get out there. 5 routes. Of each one, they sent at least 100 people to move up in the dark, not on February 18th. They were prepared to move to the base of the mountain on skis. They did not need that. The rain came in, washed it away. This is Italy. We're talking highest is about 5,000 feet here. So they did not need to do that. They had to put up some quick bridges, some hasty bridges across a creek at the bottom there. They've done that in Colorado multiple times. Engineers knew how to do that. They move up that night. They get up on top. They surprise the Germans. German defenses at this time were a very thin line holding it, and then you would counterattack. You kept most of the guys back down at the bottom. Backside of Riva Ridge is a ski resort. And so they were all hanging out at the bottom with a few guys at the top. Whenever the Allies would show up on the ridge, they would just launch a counterattack, knowing eventually they would run out of ammunition because they didn't have any supply. And that becomes the primary thing up Riva Ridge is they think, okay, they know before they step off, we're going to have to figure the supply out. They take 100 extra replacements they got. They say, you're going to carry stuff up the mountain. They're going to be porters. They don't have any American mules yet, but they've got Italian mules. They're a bit smaller, but can pack stuff up. But they also have American mule packers who do not speak Italian, but they speak mule. They know what the mules can and can't do. That's a big step. No other American unit this time showed up with guys who knew how to work with mules. So they load up the mules, they head up there, they get on the top of the ridge. It is snow covered, it's cold, it's miserable. All that fancy equipment you've seen them train with, they didn't have any of it. It was in a warehouse in Naples. Anyone been to Naples? Yeah, okay. Now Naples in wartime, oh my God. I don't think it's honestly ever recovered from that. They just didn't know, and the guys who put it there didn't know what a piton was. They thought all this weird name stuff was probably for the Brazilian units that was coming over alongside. And oh, by the way, on the right side of this, you see that BEF, that's the Brazilian Expeditionary Force. That's the Brazilian unit that joined in the attack, and the Brazilians also celebrate this 18th February Day as well. There's a connection that they still treasure to today. So they get up on the ridge, and then they're able to bring up, people can pack up supplies, ammunition, haul the ammunition up, haul the wounded down. It takes about 8 hours to get a wounded person off this ridge. They haul up heavy machine guns, they haul up 1 pack howitzer, 75 millimeter. The heaviest part is the barrel. They get the mule with that to the top, and that mule died. So That's how hard it was to do that. But with that stuff, with those weapons, and with all this supply up, they could hold off those counterattacks. So the Germans would form up to a counterattack, you just start hitting them as they come up. They spend several nights up here in cold and wet. They take no exposure casualties. They knew how to live in these conditions. They didn't have all their gear. They really missed their sleeping bags. They missed the movie. And the stove. They had their stoves, they could have melted water and had hot drinks. I was just reading an after-action report on one of the company commanders the other day. These are two things he hits on pretty heavily, because he knew what's worse. Okay, who's been there? You get there, you go, oh, if I only had this piece of gear sitting in my garage right now, things would be much better. If I'd only brought my folding chair. We've all been there at some point. They do one last thing on a Riva Ridge, and that is there is one company in the United States Army that can put up tramways, cable cars. And they go in, and sitting off over here, down a bit more, they build a cable car up. That cable car turns the evacuation time to 45 minutes. And they can move thousands of pounds of supplies up. These guys had trained all over Colorado. And if you've ever been by, if you're on the interstate and you go by Officer Gulch and I-70, look up to the south, to the 10-mile range, they built a cable car up onto that. Was one of their training things they did. That was a critical factor. But all this effort was a supporting action for the rest of the division to basically go and seize Mount Belvedere, which they do. And they do because they know that supply thing again, right? They know how to keep people in supply in this terrain. You put it 50-pound packs, you throw it on a Jeep, then on a tracked weasel, then on a mule, and then on the back of a man. A man can carry 50 pounds, a mule can carry 200, you start working it back. They knew to keep their battalion aid stations, the initial medical care you had, closer to the front, because it takes longer to evacuate someone back in the mountains. And they knew once you get on a ridge, you don't get off it. You stay on that ridge, you take little dipsy doozles to come back around, but if you go down into the draws, that's where the booby traps and the mines and the machine guns are. Stay on that ridge and keep advancing forward. They move, you can see the various attacks. By the 5th, it starts on the 18th of March, 19th February, 18th February, they start climbing. 19th February is the day the fighting begins. It ends on the 5th of March. And it ends because they're being too successful. They're pulling in all the German reinforcements. And General Truscott, who's in command at this time, goes, no, wait, don't. I don't need you to do that. I need you to basically hang on and wait, because I got plans for you. And that's the second lesson, is that while the 10th Mountain Division would attack in Italy and break the Gothic line, it wasn't supposed to do that. Remember that Highway 64? That's where the theater commander said, I want to go up that way. General Truscott, who had 5th Army, was on the left-hand side, went, yes, boss, and then went off and did his own damn thing. It's a technique. Because he realized you had units that could generate lots of combat power in the mountains. Remember that keeping in supply, they're able to move forward, they're able to just simply walk in the mountains, know how to put your feet. Not to pick on tourists, but we've all seen it, right? We were all there once. They had learned how to do that. They kick off the attack, they have to cross Rocca Rufino, kind of a big bowl. They step off in the attack, and it's a frontal assault. It's the worst kind of infantry maneuver you can do. And they get hit, and they get pinned down. The 85th Mountain Infantry was a hard luck outfit. They got nailed again on this attack. For 1 battalion of the 87th, they didn't see him. They worked their way up through a village, get onto the high ground above, unpin that division, and off they go. They clear the Rocca Rufino, they clear a pass with a road. Over that pass comes the entire 1st Armored Division to come in on their left. Anyone old enough like me to know about Kelly's heroes? Oddball, St. Oddball the tanker? He's absolutely right. A couple of Shermans give you a really nice edge. So you have 10th Mountain Divisions on the ridge, heading towards the Po River Valley. 1st Armored Divisions on the valley to the left. 80th Infantry Divisions on the flank to the right. Complete. If you try to stop them in the valleys, they're just going to blow past you on the ridges. You try to stop them on the ridge, they're going to blow through you in the valleys. And away they go down this ridge. We used to call this, in the Marines, lighting their hair on fire, and away they go. And the first man to enter the Po River Valley officially, by crossing the highway there, was a lead scout from Company A, of the 86th Mountain Infantry. He won a fifth of whiskey for that. There was a reward for that. They were supposed to do that. This is just the realization you could generate this massive amount of combat power in the mountains and move forward. And it took the Germans a bit by surprise, because they had spent years fighting the Americans and the Allies going, they don't know what they're doing. These guys did. So that's where I thought it was over, right? We know the rest of it. I don't know if my friend, Chris Anthony's been able to bring some of his films up here. We're looking into, he's got one now on Friday, he's done one on Mission Mount Vanguard. After the war, they work their way up, they go skiing again. They break all the German equipment they can find, they go climbing, work on glaciers, they go to Chamonix and climb on their time off. But they're on the list to go to Japan. They're have not fought enough to be let go yet. There's a point system. They had not spent enough time in combat. They were on the list to go to Japan, and they would have gone to Japan. How that would have worked out, we don't know, but we do know this. They were slated to land outside Tokyo. The Japanese defensive plan was to basically fight out of the mountains, fight from the Mount Fuji ridge over, and of course anyone knows about on the backside of the Japanese Alps, that's where they held their Olympics. So they would have been back in the mountains once again. Many of them would not have survived that, and we would not have the story we have today. Remember, the United States military, in preparation to invade Japan, created, I think, 500,000 Purple Hearts. We're still awarding those Purple Hearts today. So, they come home. On the way home, they're like, you're going to reorganize, re-equip, needed more weapons to deal with the Japanese, all different positions. General Hayes goes, we'll do that, but can we do that at Carson in Colorado? They're like, yes, you can go back to Carson. On the boat, on the way home, they learn the war is over. The Executioner's Act's been lifted. They get home, they go on 30 days leave, they come back to Carson. So the 10th Mountain Division was in Colorado. Hale was being torn down because it was so expensive to maintain. Stuck up in that mountain valley. They come back, they basically take them and they let them go about every 30 days. They let a regiment go. Many stayed and just hung out. He just stayed and went skiing. In fact, one guy out of the 85th, one of the last regiments to go, Thanksgiving, they're like, hey, it snowed on Berthoud Pass. I said, if you sign for a truck, he was an officer, we can go skiing. So he signed for a deuce and a half, and they drove up to Berthoud Pass, and they ran the lift, and they skied, Mines Hillside. They skied that and went down to Idaho Springs and found a vacant lot, pitched their tents, and stayed the night. Drove back Monday morning, they were like, oh, they were released from the Army. So I thought it was there, right? Gone. No. Mountain warfare training continued in Colorado Springs, Fort Carson, and back up at Hale and Ski Cooper until 1957. Many of these Olympians you refer to were there as instructors. They came back as civilians in many cases. Many of them worked through that. The first one was really a mountain training center rework, 46 to 47. And then they, after the start of the Korean War, these guys become the Mountain and Cold Weather Training Command, who will adapt this Ram's Head device. Anyone out there know about the Ram's Head for the U.S. Army? Okay. If you passed the mountaineering course, you would get a Ram's Head. Until last year, you couldn't wear it. We'll touch on that. They go up there, they do this. The United States Army has decided that, unlike what many Dole said, you can train skiers to be soldiers. They realize, no, you gotta train soldiers to be skiers. It's just too different, So they just trained entire units. They'd come in, they'd run them while they're training. The first Special Forces, second Special Forces group, that's now the 7th group, goes up there to be trained in the winter. They enjoyed it. I think it's the 511th Airborne Regimental Combat Team goes up there in 54. One of the lieutenants was a guy by the name of James Earl Jones. Ever heard of him? Yeah. He went Ranger, he went Airborne, he was in this division, he loved it. According to he writes about in his memoirs how much he enjoyed it. And in fact, it looks like in his memoirs, he actually asked, could I stay here and be an instructor? I'm like, oh, what else are you gonna do? Well, I might try acting. Like, well, that acting doesn't work out, come on back. Oh, his instructors? Guy by the name of Jim Whittaker, his brother Lou. Jim Whittaker, first American on Everest, first president of REI, I don't know which one's more important. He was a draftee from the Korean War, but because of his experience, he got sent up to be an instructor. So that training continues after the war. The Army will move it to Alaska in '57, and then lock it down in '63 to this unit's based in Alaska. Northern Warfare Training Center is still there. One of the officers who went through this course was a Marine captain. He subs at the Marine Corps. Cold weather training, still today at Pickle Meadows, California. So all American cold weather and mountain training is descended from the 10th Mountain experience, directly. Because all the guys in charge of this were all veterans of that division. The guy one of the final guys in it was who wrote the doctrine, the book, on this for the Army, ended up buying a house down the street from me in Colorado Springs and lived there, and then he retired and moved up north side of the academy. So last one, I think it's the last one. Yes, it's the last one. Vietnam, 1970s, the mountain stuff goes away, the cold weather stuff goes away. There's a realization that perhaps we need to get back into need some lighter forces. In 1985, the United States Army brings back a light division called the 10th Mountain Division, light. It is not a mountain division, intentionally. It was given that name because Senator Bob Dole, who was a replacement officer after Encore, serves in Craftsman where he was wounded. Of course, the senator and a bunch of the descendants got together and said, hey, we're going to bring back the 10th Division, why don't we call it a mountain division? They go to Secretary of the Army and he's like, yeah, sounds good to me. Goes Chief of Staff of the Army and they're like, well, yeah, why not? We call it the 101st Airborne Division. It hasn't jumped out of a plane, since 1944. So why not? But it's not a mountain division. It's to give it a heritage, something to fall back upon. And oh, by the way, say this as a Marine. That's pretty tight from us. This is a division, these dudes have figured it out. How to have pride in your unit, have that focus. But there are mountain units coming back at the same time. They're in the National Guard. And specifically, they are back in the Vermont National Guard, who sets up, they're told, go figure out how to do a battalion, and we'll do battalions across the country, go figure out how to do it. Like, well, we're gonna need a school, we need a training center, right? They set up in Jericho, Vermont, what becomes 2006, the Mountain Warfare School. And they begin to train folks through that. Again, the school basically based upon all the stuff. They adopt that ram's head, they take all the information from the 1950s. They had NCOs and guys who had been through that and knew about that from that time. So they start with that and begin to do that. And that emphasis is still going on. But here's the thing, this is the last unknown tale, it's not really there. 10th Mountain Division is trying to get back. Trying to get back to its Alpine roots. Previous commander, current commander are both very much on that. They've gone back through, they've identified 542 billets that they say you gotta go to the Mountain Warfare School. That's a huge thing. The Army adopted that Rams emblem, they changed it a bit, they had to screw with stuff, but they kept it and they authorized it for wear. Couldn't wear it before, it was National Guard, now you can wear it. And they authorized it for that. You will see them, I know they're doing the Hail or Veil again, you see that a lot of those folks come back out. If you come back into this, if around, you might also see some other groups out. Trust me, I know right now there's a bunch of Special Forces soldiers out there doing some training. And they're around quite a bit too. While it may not be as big or as much, and we add in the 1st, the 157th, the Colorado Army National Guard, who are also working on the same how to move through the mountains, it's coming back. The skills are realized, the necessity for it, and everyone is looking back at this experience of the 10th Mountain Division. Because the basic question in any staff is like, what did we do last time? Right? Same work. Reinvent no wheels. What did we do last time? And that question has come up. So this connection that you have to the division and so forth and to it is actually incredibly valuable because it is this low, it is from this that the level of skill and ability necessary to take units to put lots of young men and young women into the mountains and have them execute their mission with as few casualties as possible is the only place it can come from. And with that, that is all I have. I thank you very much for your time. Here is where you can find me on the socials. Please do, if you're not listening to me on website, do so. If you are listening, by all means, hit the Patreon there. That's how Chris makes his money. Let's buy the dude a beer. With that, I'm supposed to go see him, talk with him in the end of February up in Jackson. With that, I think did I save some time for questions?
Just a few, yeah.
So I thought they were still training up there, you know, in Leadville. Was it like a secret?
No, not all. The Guard, I've gone up with the Colorado Army National Guard, tries to get to Hale, get a company in there or two in there to do some training in the winter. So yes, they still do.
Okay.
I know the special operations guys train in various places around Colorado, Vail Pass, Monterey Pass. So yeah, they're out there.
Okay.
Training's still going on. So.
You mentioned in your book about the diet that they have and their rations. Have you taken the time to cook their special mountain ration?
No, I never have. And what this gentleman's referring to is the realization you had to have lots of calories up high, right? That's our excuse. Calories. And that's one of the things, and so they put together a pretty good, for the time, mountain ration of dehydrated stuff and dry stuff. Still had Spam. But that ration, they didn't make a lot of it and it went away. And one of the problems they had in Italy is people were actually caloric starved. They didn't feed them enough. Again, no one realized the mountains, the challenge of them. Quartermasters weren't pushing enough food up to them. But no, I haven't. But man, try to get someone to maybe make one of those mountain rations. Mountain House, of course, is the one they started making. They come back because they're making dehydrated rations for Vietnam. So there's a break there. But I wondered that. But thank you. Good question. Sir.
Trivial point, but you mentioned in your talk Officers Gulch off of I-70, and apparently that has some connection to the 10th Mountain Division. Why is it called Officers Gulch?
I believe it's called Officers Gulch before the war. I think it has something to do with the survey of it, but I do not know. Actually, I had never dug back into that. But that is a place where they practice building trams up. They built up to Peak 10. If you've gone along the Tim Orange.
It's also part of the monument.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, very good point there.
Was there not a need for this kind of capability during the Korean War? I don't think you mentioned the Korean War.
Yeah, I touched on it briefly. It is in the book. Yes, there was. And that's the reason training begins really big in earnest, is they realize they're going to have to sit through a second winter. Two things in Korea. One, low altitude. Not much skiing. So it was primarily a cold weather problem. They do look at the units in Korea and realize that the units that had spent some time in cold weather did better in cold weather. Hey, surprise. They revamped some of the clothing from that. But by the time that comes up, the war has gone very static, very positional, and again, it does. So yeah, so that's the reason the training return isn't big, because of the challenges of Korea. That's why the Marine Corps starts training in the mountains and takes it for the cold. Yes, so many things I could not cover. There's a whole other book beyond Afghanistan, which I didn't even touch on in this talk.
I didn't hear you, but I had the same question for Afghanistan.
Yes, okay. Yeah, kind of the same thing as Italy. The Brits, 10th Mountain Division Light, very deployable, put on a plane, flight anywhere, because of where they're at. That part of New York, you get down to an airfield and you're on the Great Circle Route already going either direction. That's why they were put in New York. And the fact that the economy had tanked in the 80s up there. So they ended up in Korea, in Afghanistan. The British were like, sweet, we got mountain troops. We're like, no, we don't do mountains. They had not done the training. As far as I've never, and again, I'm casting shade at people who were doing their best here. But from a purely analytical point, I don't think they read the doctrine. There's a good book on it. right in the 2000s. We're currently rewriting that book, talking with the captain who's doing it. They have a good book, no one's read it. There's gear. So we had Operation Anaconda, was one of the first operations carried out there. And they flew into the mountains on helicopters. Okay, that's good, that saves time. And they landed in the valley. That's not where you go. Any heli skiing company will tell you that. And that's the reason why that ends up such a bad fight. And so you do have some training going back. The Army sends battalions into the Kunar Valley, in the Hindu Kush. They refer to as Vietnam at altitude. They do not have, they don't have ropes. They don't know how to put lines up. So they're always on the same routes. They don't know how to evacuate people down cliffs. In one instance, they had to try to long line a guy in for a casualty, and the helicopter crashes. So they realize they don't have this, and that kind of kicks over the current renaissance that they're trying to work with that. And it comes and goes to the military. The problem that mountain warfare has in the U.S. military, in my opinion, is it looks suspiciously like fun. Right? Hey, I go skiing on my vacation. Not the way we're talking about skiing, boss. Rock climbing, you just put on some spandex and go up a cliff. Like, oh, well, no, we don't do spandex anymore, thank God. I remember the 90s, just say no. But yes, so we are in this, and that is the value of the experience of the 10th Mountain Division and of this interest in it, is that we have something we can point at and say, look, this is what it takes. Not saying that's what we have to do today, but that's what it took then. Let's start there. Thank you for the question. Sure.
Did we learn anything from or adopt anything from the Italian mountain troops?
I mentioned this guy, Ed Carter, mountaineer. He could speak any language, teach himself any freaking language. He translated a whole bunch of stuff that I've been using, thank God, because my Italian is, He translates the Italian, the German, the Austrian, World War I stuff, and some Russian stuff, and all that gets used. I don't know exactly how it gets used, but I know it ends up in the file that ends up writing for the Mountain Operations Manual that comes out in 1944, which the division reviews in Texas, and the printed copies show up in March. So about 40,000. So they did. There was a fairly strong to look back at that foreign stuff. Vibram Souls, and most of us have those, right? The Irani. Well, knowing about those souls, that they had them in Italy, that's what the United States copies to put on the ski mountain boot. You had to pay royalties back, but that's where it comes from. Because the nails, the shape of all your lugs on your Vibram sole, those are nails, to replace nails. So yeah, so there is a definite to pull as much information as you can. Another, sir?
Several years ago, I heard a rumor of his mountain relocating from Drummond back to Colorado. Can you please give that?
Yeah, everyone says they need to be back. Look, they have a brigade down in Fort Polk, Louisiana. Now, mind you, they have embraced it. It's a good training locale. A lot of their stuff shows the panda. They've really embraced that panda. You've seen the panda? The guy skiing? Seen that? Yeah, it was designed by a Japanese-American soldier who they weren't sure he was going to be loyal, so they sent him up to a mountain training center to keep an eye on him for a while while they did all the background. He designed that panda. So they have pandas on a alligator. The division, current division, is trying its best to get into every locale where it can train. Going into the Adirondacks. Yeah, they're low mountains, but going uphill is going uphill. Apparently, switchbacks had not been invented when they put trails on the East Coast. I had not figured out how the hell that was there. But these are straight the frick up. So they do that. They can send people into the NATO countries, Slovenia. There's a NATO mountain warfare center there. I had the chance to talk at them a couple years ago. Oh my God, Disney friggin' Miami, beautiful. So small though. So there is some attempt to do that. I think if I got to be king for a day, yes, you put him back at Carson. The problem with Carson's got a lot of good open training. The Army's got a lot of units in big 8-wheel armored vehicles, strikers, and that is like ideal terrain from the training. So they're really, a lot invested, and so it is a sunk cost. Or puts a brigade set of equipment in Carson and roll guys up in the mountains to train from there. Let them sleep low, train high. But it's the military. Until there is a shooting conflict going on in some place over 6,000 to 7,000 feet, a couple thousand meters, it's going to be hard before anything moves. But if you are prepared before they move, and we've asked these questions, and we're informed citizens, it's our job, then yes, then perhaps we get back into that. But no, I'm aware of nothing with that. It comes up every time. We'd love to. I know they would love to, but they have the job, they have the mission, and they're executing it. Marine Corps still trains battalions up high every year. Becoming more important as Norway comes back and Alaska comes back. So, thank you. Thank you.